Today I'm going to be making one of my favorite comfort foods. It's a sourdough cornbread. I'll make this probably once a week. When you are running a sourdough start, you got to use it for something. This is pretty quick and easy, and I haven't found anybody that doesn't really like it. I can eat way too much of it in a single sitting, and so today I'm gonna share my recipe with you. I already gathered my sourdough start. It's nice and bubbly. That makes it ideal. Although the rising of the cornbread doesn't come from the sourdough. It's going to come from our baking soda and baking powder. But the flavor definitely does come from the sourdough. So start with 300 grams of my sourdough start. And then whenever I cook with sourdough, I use grams. It just makes it easier to measure out everything exactly. If you try and measure out sourdough, it sticks to everything. So then if you measure out a cup and a half, do you really get a cup and a half in there? How much does it vary? Where if you just do it by weight, then you know you've got exactly the same amount every time. That's about as much concession as I give to the metric system, but grams are a nice small unit, works pretty well. Next part's going to be cornmeal. Tear my scale. I need 250 grams of cornmeal. And I like to kind of pile my cornmeal on top of the sourdough start, because the acid in the sourdough start, when it comes into contact with the baking soda, baking powder, it's going to give you a nice rising action. And if it comes into contact immediately, then you might not get it in the oven in time to take advantage of that. All right, next, just a half a cup of flour, or 60 grams. Just remember to tear your scale every time. Flour. Next on the recipe is eggs. I also needs a cup of milk, so I like to pour the full cup of milk first. It means less dishes I have to do for cleanup. There's my full cup of milk. Then I'll crack 2 eggs into that, and then I can beat the eggs in the milk. It just makes life fairly easy. I'm just going to beat the egg so it's nice and mixed up. This will actually be the last thing that I add, because this is how my sourdough start and my baking soda, baking powder come into contact. All right, next, stick of butter melted. I use the microwave for this. That'll just get poured right in there. Just try not to mix up the sourdough while you do it. Shouldn't be too hard. Next, half a cup of sugar. I don't know that in grams because I never use actually a half a cup. I don't like things quite as sweet, so I just eyeball it, maybe like a quarter cup. All right, teaspoon of salt, two teaspoons of baking powder, and then half a teaspoon of baking soda. Looks like about a half. All right, now that I've got those all measured out, it's just going to be stir up my eggs and milk, and then pour it in. Oh, my oven just finished getting ready. Perfect timing. So now I'm going to take about 30 to 45 seconds and just stir the cornbread. You don't want to stir it too much, but you don't want clumps either. You want the baking soda, baking powder, and sourdough all nice and thoroughly distributed. So 30 to 45 seconds usually will do. You can see it's starting to raise up a little bit. You want to make this step fairly quick. Because I was filming this, I actually prepped my pan. I use parchment paper in there. Makes cleanup and cutting and all that super easy. Once it's mixed, just pour it in the parchment. And then just kind of swirl it around in here just to make sure that it all gets in the corners, and then it'll flow evenly. Then it's going to go in the oven for about a half hour. We'll check it. So this is what I like it to look like. Nice golden brown. Should be delicious. You could certainly use some honey butter. I usually just use butter. I'll let this sit for about 10 minutes, and then I'll just lift it out of the tray using the parchment paper, cut it into squares, and then I actually have a small cookie sheet that fits over the top perfect, and I'll have it eaten in a day or two.